Greetings, brethren and sistren. Mav's back, and this time he made a game in 4 days. He said he'd participate in gmtk, and here's the devlog for it. This time the theme was countdown. He couldn't really get many ideas from that. He only got some really long narrative games and one platformer idea. This time the plan was simply get the idea in within the first half a day, and then code in the first day, then art, and then music, and then the rest for the last day. The only ideas that he could think of were narrative that would have taken a little too much art that he considered he could not do in within the time limit, a platformer with a time limit where the faster you go the slower the time moves back, and that's it. Even after the jam ended, he still does want to make the narrative game though. That game would have been a world where the doomsday clock is moments away from midnight. For those unaware, doomsday clock is a clock which is made to tick toward midnight as humanity comes closer to its own destruction. It is a way to spread awareness of our environment. It's not particularly scientific, but it's a cool idea. He imagined a world where areas would disappear over time as the clock ticks toward midnight. However, the narrative was too deep, and as a solo developer, it would have taken way more than 4 days for him to make this. So he made the speedrunning platformer idea. To be more on theme, he wanted to do something dramatic at the end of the timer. So he decided when the timer ends, the game would just shoot the player back at high velocity. The first thing he did was take the signal bus from Soul Decode and add it here. Then he worked on the player and its controller. He wanted to try a composition heavy design this time, as opposed to inheritance heavy design that he uses normally. He used resources for the controller and made a controlled character class that allowed the resources to run on process and physics process. It worked out quite nicely. The first controller he made was for gravity. It simply added the acceleration due to gravity every physics frame. It could have been shared by multiple characters to give all of them the same gravity. Then he made the base button controller. For the base controller, he only wanted it to do left and right movement and jumping. He decided to make a class to hold all the relevant data for the controller. The data would be added to the character by using meta properties in GD script. This also meant, in essence, a character could only have one button controller, which was a convenient invariant. For the controls themselves, he implemented a lot of timers to implement coyote jump and control buffering. For jumping, it first changed the vertical velocity of the character so that he'd go up. Then, while the button is pushed, it added an upward acceleration so that the player can control how high they want to jump. The left-right movement had acceleration so that it takes time to get up to speed. When the character is moving in one direction and you click the opposite direction, the game increases the acceleration for that direction so that you change direction faster. This makes the game feel snappier, but even then you lose a lot of speed. He wanted to have a way to change direction without losing that much speed. The answer was easy: wall jumping. The wall jump naturally was its own controller. It did get the meta from the button controller to get the timers. It does have its own meta. It needed it to differentiate wall jumping from normal jumping for the shared timers. Furthermore, the meta stored the maximum vertical speed of the player in the air. When successfully doing a wall jump, it restores the maximum speed while changing the direction. It also adds a small upward speed. It was maybe the most fun mechanic of the game. It wasn't particularly hard to change the engine timescale so that the faster you move, the slower the time moved. It did also affect the acceleration due to gravity significantly, which he didn't realize at the time. Due to this, the terrain needed to be much larger than map expected them to be, and even then, they still felt cramped. And honestly, the player character moves so fast, even with the time slowing down, it still almost moves too fast. Later he did scale the gravity with speed, but it was too late by then. The level design was fixed and changing the gravity too much would have broken the flow. Making the countdown timer was easy. It had a timer, and when the timer timed out, it decremented a number. Mav initially thought checkpoints would be hard. but it was simply move the wall and reset the timer when the player enters the area. He then made a global signal for each tick of the countdown. For flinging the player back when the countdown ends, it simply listened to the countdown tick. When the countdown reaches 0, it first disables player movement and then disables the countdown. It then gives the player a high velocity back and upwards so that it looks like the player is flung backwards. The player could position themselves such that they are not flung back to the last checkpoint. Mav thought that was a neat brute force mechanic. If you can't do it in one go, you can just make your own checkpoint. Since the core mechanics were done, next up was art. Before that, he needed to think of a narrative to base his sprites off of. He decided on ninja aesthetic due to speed. Then he thought, what if it was a training of a ninja? Maybe they are learning to run away from a domain after an assassination. Maybe if they fail to get to a checkpoint within time, their master is the one flinging them backwards. With that in mind, he made the sprite sheet and a tile map. He also added the animation of the master hitting the ninja in the fling back sequence. He then tried making a background, but he just could not make one that was ninja themed and looked good. So Mav decided the background would just be blank. Next part was music. After making something satisfactory, when Mav went to save the project, Reaper just crashed. He knew it was a wine problem, so he decided to update his system, but that didn't solve the problem. Finally, switching to Proton Experimental solved it. The final music that he made sounded much worse than the first one that he had made. That's just some of the struggle with using Linux for you. After that, he worked on some quick UI. This time the UI went much smoother. He made a selectable button class and subclassed it to make different buttons. He would probably use this system for other game jams too. He doesn't really like talking about UI, so let's move on. If you do want to know more about this, comment down below. Mav did get someone to playtest his game. From that, he added some checkpoints that can stop the countdown timer so that the player has some leeway between each checkpoints. This also made it easier for them to read the tutorials that he had added. Then was the speedometer. He had been making obstacles all throughout this project even though he didn't mention that. At this point, he made one last obstacle course that had 3 different routes. He also imported all the sound effects from Foxcell to this game. Then he just made the banner and icon for the game. For the banner, he for the first time was able to draw some satisfactory human figures within a few hours. That was basically all that he did for the game though. For the next 5 days, he streamed playing others' games twice a day, and it allowed Mav to reach the milestone of 30 subscribers. Next milestone is 50 subscribers, by the way. As promised, he made a Discord server. Links in the description. The server has Yose Magepov's channel, or rather, you send Mav games he plays on Fridays channel. You can send bite-sized games that you made or a friend made there, and he will play and review it on Fridays. He got the idea from the rating streams. It was so fun playing games, and the developers watched and commented on how Mav played them. So Mav would like to do similar streams once a week. Don't forget to join the Discord server for that, and maybe subscribe while you are at it. Anyways, as for the final ranking of the game, let's not sugarcoat it, it was bad. The game ended up being more of a rage game than Mav intended it to be. The expected path was smooth and satisfactory, but finding it was very hard and tedious. The music was bad, and the checkpoints had very little visual feedback. Furthermore, the game ended very abruptly. At least it was a good learning experience. It also gave Mav good ideas to make Soul Decode more extensible in the future. So all in all, Mav thinks this was a very productive jam for Mav. Next devlog will be on Soul Decode. Hopefully by then these 3 characters are done and added to the game. As for playtesting Soul Decode, Mav wants to get more members in his Discord server before starting that. That's all for this time, and Mav's out.